Part 2, Analogy Autopsy.
There was a private detective that was pursuing a criminal. Eventually, he heard that the guy was hiding in this 4-story building. One day, he went in and looked in every room, but he did not find the criminal. Could he conclude that the guy was not there? Of course not, because maybe when he went in, the guy slipped out from the back door, or while he was looking for him, he was playing hide and seek with him. You need to look at all places at all time to know that he is not there.
A typical building story is about 10 feet tall, so a 4-story building should be around 40 feet tall. Using the door in the picture as a guide, I assume that it's at least wide enough to allow an average man to walk through. An average man's width is about 18 inches, so let's just round up to 20. I counted the windows that seemed to be about the width of the door and got about 11, let's just say 12 to be safe. So that's 20 inches by 12, we get 240 inches or 20 feet. I assume that the length and the width are the same, so that general space would be 20 by 20. And I counted about 2.5 rooms in the front, so I think that we're about 20 by 20. The bottom is actually indentated, but I'll just ignore that, give this place more room to work with by assuming the bottom's the same size as everything else. Kind of makes the math a little bit easier, plus it gives the bad guy more room to work with. Okay, so that would put the front of the building about 50 feet. I'll just assume the darn thing is 50 by 50 feet. Maths is hard. Okay, so the area of an empty container that's 50 by 50 foot is 2,500 square feet. So we just times that by 4, and that's 10,000 square feet in total that our average person has somewhere to hide in. But that would assume the whole thing's empty, and if it was, then locating a person in an empty place, even if they could fly around and float to all those possible locations, would be pretty easy. There he is, over there. Okay. So, there's some walls, and because it's an office building, we probably have some pipes for plumbing, and also we have electricity, so we have wires, and we have office spaces, and so we have chairs, and computers, and desks, and printers, and copiers, and fax machines, and meeting rooms, and all the other things that you might find in a typical office space. So that puts the total place that a person could hide a lot less. So, somewhere in there, he might be hiding. But I'm a security guard, and I chase this guy inside. But I must be a really bad one, since I didn't call for backup, so the guy can escape from the building? Also, I have to be just crap at my job, because I only look in each room, and I don't also look in the places that he could be hiding in each room? Man, I should just be fired from my job. So really the analogy requires us to assume that a piss-poor guard glances into a few places with no backup for the guy, and then concludes he's not in the building because he sucks pain at his job. Now, it gets a little bit worse than that, because you want us to look everywhere in the building all at the same time to locate the bad guy. But that's not really true. If we had a decent guard in the first place and some backup, a single person could do the job. If there was, let's say, security cameras in the office building, then they could just see where the bad guy went and where he might be hiding and reduce the overall possible places that the bad guy might be. See, we use this thing known as logic to be rational about how we approach a given event, and then we use this other thing we call investigation to look into the matter. And then we use this wonderful thing called science that let us make cameras and computers that make our job way easier. But assuming we had backup and or video cameras to work with, we can lower the rooms we need to check by the amount of time that the bad guy had a head start on us, assuming a relative running speed, but he's going to be slowed down, of course, by objects and people. We also get the people inside the building who might tell us where he went, unless the building is also devoid of personnel. So that would be another assumption we have to make for your analogy to work. And if it's not clear by now, your analogy sucks, Spain is pretty dead in the water, but I'm not done eviscerating it yet. So we can know the person is not in the office building if we looked everywhere there is to look using logical methods, placing guards in each room, scanning the camera footage, asking people there if they saw him run in and where he went, and also ensure that he didn't escape the building by placing guards outside. So we had a bad guy run into a building like this, and one person go in, do a crap job, then that guy gets fired for not locating the bad guy. And whether he concludes the bad guy wasn't in there or not, it's irrelevant. He sucked at his job. But if we have a bad guy run into the building, and the guy actually is good at his job, he calls backup, goes in, checks video surveillance, asks people questions, posts guards at each place they look for the bad guy, then we have an event where we could declare that the bad guy is, in fact, not in the building after all the options have been logically and properly exhausted. But your analogy doesn't do that. But it gets worse if your god's not natural. See, the bad guy is natural, right? We don't have a ghost running into the building. We have a natural man running into it. So if your god is natural, then sure, your office building and its crap guard could be an analogy that you use. If, however, you're posing a supernatural god, then you can't. The analogy breaks down to nothing. Not only is your analogy wrong, it's wrong at every possible level that it could be wrong. It's fractally wrong, and it lays dead. I've killed it. Moving on.
If God exists, he must be infinite and eternal.
Why? Why does God have to be infinite and eternal? Could it just be one or the other and not be both? Is it just your God that you're talking about? Or are you talking about any god? If something or somebody possesses these attributes, does that automatically make them into God? Or is this just something that God has to have in order to be God? I wish you'd clarify the matter for us, but you don't do that in this video.
Therefore, you must go to every corner of the universe at all time to find God, in order to be sure that God does not exist. Many people demand the proof of God's existence, but we are finite and we live only a short time. How can anyone prove the infinite and eternal God? If someone could do that, isn't him God?
Okay, so I'd like to ask this video maker a direct question at this point that I'm pretty sure, given the little interaction I've had with him, he won't respond to. But I'm going to ask the question anyways. To prove God, you must be God? Listening to what you just said, that seems to be what you're saying here. I don't know that that is what you intended to mean or intended to say, but you said that if somebody could prove God, they'd have to be God. You said it right here.
If someone could do that, isn't him God?
So if you're willing to submit the statement that the only proof of God is to be God, then it would almost go without saying, but I would want you to say and submit it anyways, that there's no proof of God unless you're God. Or, to just shorten it down, there's no proof of God for us mortals. Humans have no proof of God. Say that, and at least you're an honest person. If you don't, well, then maybe you want to undo what you just said right here in the comments below, which you probably won't do, because I don't think that you're very honest, but I could be wrong. Prove me wrong.
Therefore, you must have the attributes of God to know God does not exist. In other words, you must be God to know God does not exist.
So if I'm following along correctly, to prove God is not God, you have to be God, and also to prove God, you must be God. But, again, if I was eternal and infinite, and was also not God, I would be able to know that there wasn't a God. But those attributes, I then would have to assume, make me a God. So who's to say that I'm not infinite and eternal? You can't prove scientifically that I'm not. Your move.
You can't do that. Therefore, it is impractical and unrealistic to say God does not exist.
But who says that? I mean, there might be a few that say that. Now, I don't believe in certain versions of God, and I have yet to be presented with a version of God that I could possibly believe in. But in order for me to get just from belief to acknowledging that it's actually real is a whole nother step in and of itself. So there's two difficult hurdles to overcome. First, you have to convince me that it's possible, then I could at least believe in it. Then you have to show me that it's actual, and that's a whole separate category. According to you, nothing can prove God except God. Well, okay, God, prove yourself. Nothing happens. Doesn't matter how I say it, how many people say it, how often we say it, nothing occurs. So the conclusion to be drawn from that is either God can't hear us, or it doesn't care enough to answer, or some combination thereof. But unless God will produce itself, then we have no proof of God. So why should we believe it exists? And then, even if we did believe it exists, how could we hope to know that it's actual and not just in our minds when we're not being given anything more than just faith? Faith is something that people have, and you can have faith about any number of things, but you have to admit that that's what you have, and to do otherwise is very dishonest. If you just said, I have faith in God, I'd have no problem. That's fine. Okay, great. I might ask you why and ask you some questions, but I'm not going to set out to disprove it because it's just a belief statement. But when you say there is a God, then that's a whole different matter entirely. But it doesn't matter. You haven't given us any reason to believe, let alone to think that there is God, whatever God is, which you haven't clarified except to say that whatever God is, it has to be infinite and eternal, and you can't prove it, nor can you disprove it unless you're God. So why should I believe in it? Why shouldn't I say there's no God without any proof of God? If I had proof of God, then I wouldn't say that. But I don't. So it's reasonable to say that if I wanted to say that. Not that I perchance am saying that, because I don't know what God is or isn't. On some gods, I will say no to that particular God. For example, any God that requires me to reject any aspect of reality is off the table. I would say that God doesn't exist because it requires me to reject an aspect of reality. So I don't know which version of God or what God is to you, so I can't say no to your God quite yet, but it's getting there.
Some people don't believe God exists because they believe in evolution.
Who? Who doesn't believe in God because of evolution? Show me one person. One. Show me one person. Give me one example of this. Citation required.
They think we are the result of random chances. Therefore, there's no need of God.
Well, actually, very few people would agree with this statement because it's misrepresentative of biological evolution so much that I just have to reject it. Unless they didn't know or understand biological evolution, then they might accept that statement that it's random chance. See, natural selection has a filtering mechanism built in. So, yes, random, but random, and then it hits a wall, and that wall filters it down so that it's less random every time. Because only the things that work make it through. So without that filtering mechanism in there, I have to reject your statement. And your statement makes me think that you don't really understand evolution. And the statement that you made before that I think is complete and utter bull, that people don't believe in God because they believe in evolution, is just a non-starter. There are plenty of people that believe in God and accept biological evolution. So I don't see this as being something that's true. And also, you saying believe in evolution. You don't have to believe in evolution. There's plenty of evidence for it. You can know that it's true. You can demonstrate that it's true. No belief required.
Is evolution scientific? I have another video called The Death Knell of Evolution.
Oh, don't worry. I'll get to it. And I hope that you've won your Nobel Prize for disproving evolution. If not, man, I want to help you, but only if I can, split the prize. It's $1 million that you get when you win the Nobel Prize, by the way. I didn't know if you know that. But I'll totally help you with that. But, again, I want some of the money. Maybe not 50-50. You can get, say, 90% of it, okay? I just want 10%, all right? But I'll totally help you with that. Because I'm sure that you have all the science in order. Maybe you just flipped a few arguments or something. So when I get to that video, I'll totally help you there. But I'll do so only if you agree to give me 10% of the Nobel Prize that you'll win when you disprove evolution in that video. That I'm totally sure that you're going to be able to do in that video. It's hard not to laugh. Shh, don't laugh. Anyways, yeah, so we'll get to that.
I use very simple biology and the probability to show that evolution is baseless. Hope you will watch it. If the human were the result of random chances, life would be meaningless.
Well, that's an appeal to consequence. If X is true and we don't like X, therefore X can't be true, whatever X might be. So if this is true, then, oh no, blah. Well, so what? Even if it's the case that life becomes meaningless or life is meaningless, so what? That wouldn't mean the other thing wasn't true. Just would be a consequence. But I don't think that the two are tied together. You'd have to demonstrate that the two are tied together. And there is certainly an objective meaning to life within evolutionary biology. Do you want to know what it is? It's to produce offspring. Yeah, that's it. So basically it's to have sex and create an offspring. I like to just say it's to have sex. So if anyone out there would like to help me to have an objective meaning, let me know. In the comments below. Nobody's going to do that. Anyways, okay. What was I saying? Sorry, my mind went somewhere else for a moment. Yes, the meaning of life is sex. Okay. Anyways, back to the video.
Why? Because no matter how long you will live, say 120 years, you are still like a spark. All of a sudden disappears in the infinite time of the universe.
Oh no, more appeals to consequence. But that would be true even if life wasn't random, which it kind of isn't, but whatever. So even if what you're saying is true, which it's not, but even if it was, how does it being finite matter? That is to say, how does that fact mean that it's meaningless? I think it would be that there's even more meaning because I'm not in that moment where I no longer exist. I'm in this moment here and now, and this moment here and now absolutely matters. I think one decent analogy that might help you out would be a book in a library that has not been read. That book is not meaningless just because it hasn't been read. Just because one day the book will fall apart into dust doesn't mean that it had no meaning. Now, if you mean objective meaning, I don't know. What if there isn't any? So what? I think it's much cooler if we humans can give ourselves meaning every single moment of every single day. Although it doesn't add or negate from my argument in any way, shape, or form, I'd like to cite the two best philosophers of all time.
We've been to the past. We've been to the future. We've been all around the afterlife. And you know, Ted, the best place to be is here. The best time to be is now. And all we can say is, let's rock!
We'll be dancing in the streets all night. All night, all night, yeah.
You don't know where you come from, and you don't know where you are going to.
Where are we? I don't care.
Life is meaningless, blah, 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 blah. Everything is meaningless, blah, 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 blah. Nietzsche, blah, blah, blah. God is dead, blah, blah. You haven't read Nietzsche, blah, blah, blah. Thank you for watching, blah. Alright, well, I'll see you in part 2, which is actually part 3. Which is dealing with video 2. So no, wait, it's not part 2. It's. I'll see you next time. I'll deal with a different video. Blah.